All right, let's try Ulrich in Germany. You're on with Vice Rhino and Matt. How are you?
Hello.
How are you? Oh God, what have I done? I feel so woefully unprepared.
Well, we're not prepared either.
Hello?
I mean, I don't know how you can be worried that you're unprepared. We didn't even know you were calling or what you were calling about. So you should definitely have an advantage.
Yeah, well, I was calling about, I'm a great fan of yours. I've been listening to hundreds of your shows, your YouTube videos, and that's why
we'll fix that.
Call in and tell you, hello?
No, I'm sorry. I'm in a jokey mood because I just got roasted. So I just said, we'll fix that after you said you were a fan, but go ahead, get to your point. I'll stop interrupting.
Yes, that's what I wanted to explain to you, what you've been doing wrong all these years, and tell you how to do your job, and you're welcome in advance.
Thank you.
Now, well, I was calling in about, because you make this argument that, because I'm an atheist, and you make this argument that the theists have the burden of proof, whereas the atheists only have to basically point out a lack of evidence. You make this argument about the court case scenario, where the prosecutor has to prove guilt, but the defense attorney only has to prove lack of evidence of guilt, not innocence. But the problem I have with that is, even though technically the defense attorney can get their client off, they may have still ruined their life, because in the court of public opinion, they might still be considered as the guy who might have gotten away with murder or something. And that's why, even though you, as the defense attorney, you can pat yourself on the shoulder and say you've gotten your client off, you may not have done enough, and maybe proving innocence, i.e. disproving God, is the better way to go than just pointing out that there's lack of evidence for God.
Okay, so I'm gonna say a couple things real quick, and then I'm gonna let Vice take it because he just did this. So
I heard
hang on. I don't disagree with you that it would be better to prove that God doesn't exist. The problem is, if the proposition is unfalsifiable, that's not possible. The burden of proof is always on the individual making a claim, whether it is claiming God exists or claiming God doesn't exist. And if you claim God doesn't exist, you've adopted a burden of proof, and you may or may not be able to meet it. So you can go with the courtroom analogy and say, oh, well, if you didn't prove your innocence, people might still think you're guilty. Yes, that's true. Tough shit. That's the way of reality. If you're not able to prove you're innocent, you just have to deal with that. But I'll let Vice do it because he can prove God doesn't exist.
Yeah. So, yeah, I kind of agree. Like, there are so many different God claims out there that to take on the burden of proof and say, no, I am going to prove that no God exists, is like every God you disprove, someone's going to come up and be like, oh, well, what about this one? You'll spend your entire life making arguments about that. So what I recently did was I generally focus on Christianity and the Christian God, specifically young earth creationism, who they have a penchant for taking the Bible more literally than it probably should be taken. Well, then it definitely should be taken. But so I actually made a video where I went through and I compared, like, okay, this is what the Bible says about who God is, and this is what else the Bible says about who God is, and these two things are incompatible. They're direct opposites. So like, it says God is love, and then it defines love as being patient and kind and does not boast and is not jealous. And then it says God's name is jealous. He's so jealous that he personally identifies with the quality of jealousy, and that is his name. But love is not jealous, and God is love. So like, just from that, like, and the video is 43 minutes long. I went through a whole bunch of examples of that, and I had to cut it off short because there was just so many more. Like, I didn't even touch on Deuteronomy 28, which read the second part of that, like the second 2/3 of that chapter sometime, and tell me that the God who proclaimed that was loving. And it just, but like in general, if somebody says I have a God, it's like, okay, that's nice. Convince me that your God exists. Give me what you've got. And if, like, at the end of the day, if their arguments just are not convincing to you, then they have not met their burden of proof with you. And this is another thing, is that what will convince you is going to be different from person to person. But nobody has the time to spend their entire lives seeking to disprove all these different God claims. So it should be enough to just say, like, okay, well, try and convince me. If you don't bring anything new to the table that I haven't heard a million times before, then I'm just going to remain at my default position of I don't accept your claim.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Ulrich, what do you do if the God that somebody's talking about is one that you can't disprove?
Well, the question is, I mean, when you make the claim of a supreme God, that one you can't actually disprove, because that's actually a negative claim. That's basically the claim that there is a God who doesn't have a God himself. I mean, basically,
hang on. Maybe this is a language issue, but it seems that's a really curious way of defining, to say there's a supreme God as a God that doesn't have a God. But I think what you're describing is the greatest being possible. But how do you prove that God doesn't exist?
Well, for instance, every third caller, somebody calls in and says something can have possibly come from nothing, therefore God. I mean, you've had these calls. And what you usually do is you say, how do you know that? Which is cool, Socratic method, I'm down with that. But
you're not down with that, because I just asked you how you could disprove a particular God, and instead of giving me an answer, you're talking about people calling in to say that something can't come from nothing. I don't care what other people say. I don't care how people are defending their God. You seem to think that you can disprove a maximal God, and I've just wondered how you did it.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. Okay, people ask that, and you say, how do you know something can come from nothing? Whereas I would simply go, what about the entirety of everything? Because what is there other than everything? By definition, there is nothing.
No, but your response isn't a response to the question. If somebody says something can't come from nothing, for you to say, what about the entirety of everything? First of all, that's not saying, how do you explain everything? Is you asking a question. That's you using the Socratic method. It's not you disproving anything at all. And secondly, if somebody says something can't come from nothing, and you say, what about everything? And what if they just say that didn't come from nothing? You would then have to prove that everything did come from nothing in order to be a counter to their argument.
Well, if something is really everything, then there is by definition nothing else. So no matter what everything is it finite, is it infinite, is it eternal, does it have a beginning or an end, does it contain one, zero, or many gods? It doesn't matter. Whatever everything is, it can't have come from anything.
How do you know that?
And that's what I mean. Because if there were anything else, then everything wouldn't have been everything, by the definition of everything.
I don't think your concept of what you are able to disprove is quite as strong as you think it is.
Really?
So first of all, what I asked was, how do you disprove the supreme God? And instead, you decided to try to disprove the claim that something can't come from nothing, which is not necessarily the same as there is a God above all others. So you're not even disproving the thing that I asked about, the thing that you said you could disprove. But if I say, if I put my theist hat on and just say something can't come from nothing, and you just say, what about everything? You haven't responded to the argument. You haven't addressed it. You haven't produced anything remotely edifying to show how something could come from nothing.
But everything altogether, everything in existence is something, isn't it?
That's just playing semantics.
But where did it come from?
Therefore, something.
Where did everything come from?
It can't have come from anything, because there is by definition nothing other than everything.
No.
That's just playing semantics, though. I think. Like, isn't that just like the response to that is like, okay, everything that's not God was made by God, and then what was there before everything? There was God. God was the only thing. So that's it is now part of everything, and He made everything else. Like this objection seems to be specific to the cosmological argument, which is how did everything begin sort of argument. I guess the Kalam version of that, where everything that begins to exist has a cause sort of thing. But there are much better objections to the cosmological argument than just saying, well, everything definitionally is everything, and so like, what is there that's not part of everything? It just seems like
it seems like your response is when they say something can't come from nothing, and your response is basically to just assert that everything has always existed in some form or another, and that's fine. And I suspect that you may be right, but that's not a proof, and it's not an argument, and it's not evidence, and it's not a rebuttal to their position. It's just another assertion.
Well, I didn't say anything about the nature of everything. We don't know what everything is. Just if it's everything, then it can't come from anything. But it's not a
no. You did just say something about the nature of everything by saying that the person is wrong to say that something can't come from nothing.
Yeah, because everything can't have come from anything.
How do you know that?
Because that's how everything is defined.
No. You don't get to define this away, just like they don't get to define it into existence.
This is a complex cosmological question that you need to break out theoretical physical models of the early universe to figure it out. Like you can't just appeal to a modern English definition to explain what happened in the pre-Big Bang universe.
Yeah. If we don't have an explanation for why there's something rather than nothing, and there are plenty of candidates, either there was never nothing, there couldn't be a nothing, or there was something else and it changed form or whatever. We don't have this explanation. And so it would be a mistake for us to assert that we do, just as it is for the theists to assert that they do. It's just go with, I don't know, and you'll be fine. Your frustration over not being able to disprove something is one that we share. But if the fact is something is unfalsifiable, if a proposition is unfalsifiable, claiming to have falsified it is as big a mistake as anything any theist has ever done.
Well,
hey, I got to move on. I appreciate the call.